Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Is the Cuban contender Luis Ortiz going to make Joe Joyce wait for a fight? There was a lot of talk back in December that fight between the pair would be next. Some of the language, it's changing now, so I'm not so sure. And Luis Ortiz potentially has other more inviting prospects and options for him ahead of a Joe Joyce fight. And Joe Joyce's manager Sam Jones isn't quite as bullish now. He's confident a fight with Ortiz will happen, but he's not saying next. But what he is saying, and I'll just bring it up here, this is from Twitter. He was asked likelihood of us seeing Joyce fight Ortiz this year, 95%. And then you've got Chris Pratt, the GIF there, acting all surprised. And the fight will be called Avoided versus the Avoided. And that's Sam Jones's follow-up tweet to that GIF. And then you have another tweet from Jones, and this is after Michael Benson, the TalkSport journalist, tweeted the 95% statement, Sam Jones saying 96%. And this is another tweet here. Mark my words, Joe will be challenging for a world title within 12 to 18 months max. Probably means Joe there, but in terms of the 95 and 96% statements, it's not quite saying it's next, but he's saying it's likely to be this year, 95 and 96% chance that it happens this year. But what about next? Because certainly he's not as bullish as he was a few weeks ago. And that was when Luis Ortiz accepted his challenge. See this Boxing Scene article from December the 5th. Luis Ortiz accepts Joe Joyce's challenge, wants him next. Some of the quotes here. I will enjoy fighting Joyce and will enjoy giving him his first career loss, but I want him to remember it was him who called me out. I wasn't looking for him, but again, if he let his hype man or manager get in his head and thinks he's that good and wants it, why wait? I don't turn down fights. It's the first for me to be called out for a fight. He doesn't understand that I really enjoy what I do, and this is all I know how to do. And then this is how I put food on the table, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so Luis Ortiz accepting the call out, and he said, why wait? But now Luis Ortiz is probably with his management team looking at the landscape of the division and other options that are out there, because Luis Ortiz could be on the brink of a world title, as I covered off in my recent video, sort of looking at his fortunes or potential fortunes in 2019. And with Dominic Breazeale likely to get some form of interim title fight, given that Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury are likely to have a rematch, the WBC will have to deal with Breazeale. If Dillian Whyte fights Anthony Joshua, Johnny on the spot would be Luis Ortiz to fight Dominic Breazeale. And that potential fight, or the prospect of something like that, for the moment, I'm sure, is kind of muddying the waters with what is happening with Joyce and Ortiz. Because Ortiz and his people will be looking at the option of Breazeale going, well, this could be for a potential title. It's a bigger fight in general, and it certainly would get him a step closer, much closer, to a rematch with the WBC champion. And ultimately, after all, that is what Luis Ortiz wants. And even in this December 5th article, he's saying, look, if I just want to keep making a name for myself and maybe we'll get a shot at Wilder again, or even Fury or Joshua. He wants those big fights. At the moment, Joyce, it's a decent fight in terms of how big it is, but it's not as big as those other fights. And let's be realistic, a title fight is likely to bring in more cash, more legacy, more credit for Ortiz than fighting Joyce. And the upside is all there for a Joyce fight, for Joyce rather than Ortiz, because if Ortiz loses to Joe Joyce, well, he's pretty much finished. A lot of people would write him off and go, he got too old and he's done. Even though Luis Ortiz is a good fighter and Joe Joyce is clearly not really a prospect, he's a contender in disguise. He's just, got a small resume at this current time, but that's courtesy of turning pro quite late in the piece. He's now 33, 7-0 at the moment, and a Joe Joyce and Luis Ortiz fight for his 8th fight, that would be a massive statement. And that would put him on track, I believe, for a title shot within about 18 months. But 12 months, yeah, I don't really see that being sort of viable. Just, you think about the mandatories that are piling up just for Anthony Joshua if he keeps winning, and Deontay Wilder if he gets through Tyson Fury. There could be a 3rd fight, and even then he might be ordered to fight the winner if there is an interim title fight of Breazeale and whoever that opponent would be, if that fight comes to pass. So it's hard to see a title fight for Joe Joyce within 12 months. 18 months, well, potentially, but even that feels maybe a bit remote. Joyce needs to really get through a couple of good contender level wins in 2019 to get in the conversation. So I don't doubt that Luis Ortiz wants to fight Joe Joyce, but right now, is Joyce the option there for him? I'm sure with this UK TV deal, the ITV deal that Al Heyman's put in place, where he's got to have some cards there and whatnot, Joyce will be in his plans for those events. And a Joe Joyce and Luis Ortiz fight could be a co-main event or a main event, in the first half of the year, if they were to get that platform off the ground and if that fight was to be made. But at the moment, I can well imagine Ortiz and his people are looking at the landscape of the division going, what is actually out here for us at the moment? Because Luis Ortiz, an older fighter, he will be wanting to see what the biggest fights for the biggest bang for buck, but also what gets him closer to a title shot. And at the moment, is Joe Joyce that option? It's unlikely. There probably would be some money on offer for that fight in the UK for Ortiz, but beyond that, there's not really a lot there for him. And if they're thinking strategically, they're going to want to plot Ortiz's path carefully, because if he loses, that probably puts an end to his title dreams. And the next fight, if it is against Brazil, I think many people would favour Luis Ortiz to beat Brazil, probably by a battering. He would probably knock him out in about half a dozen rounds. Brazil, very hittable, can be punched almost at will these days. And that's the sort of fight that you'd think Ortiz would go for, especially if it gets him closer to a title shot. But the careful positioning of 95% this year, well, we could still well see it, but it just may not be next. It might be later in the year after Ortiz has done whatever he has to do. And if he has a loss to someone next, well then a Joyce fight, it could be very makeable, more makeable than it potentially is right now. We'll have to see. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.